Hey guys, hey. As promised, I'm doing a Agony type of video tonight. So I had y'all write in some questions or concerns that you had, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a professional, anything, I'm not, please, just take my advice with a pinch of salt. I want this to be like you're talking to a friend, right? If you're actually having issues with mental health or, anything that requires medical attention, please seek professional help. I'm just going to try and give friendly advice within the scope of being an ASMR creator. And I hope there are some glimmers of wisdom in here. I'm not sure there will be. I've written down your questions. And yeah, I'm wearing my jacket, by the way, because I think it makes a good sound. Hopefully it's not super distracting. I've written down your questions, and I will be going through them. Now, I've actually written out my responses, because if I were to just blah 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 my way through this, all of my responses would be completely incoherent. And also, I want to make this video in French, and I want to make sure the advice I give is the same in both videos, so that no one's missing out on the full extent of my response, if that makes sense. So all questions have been answered in both languages. I don't know which I'm going to publish first. I imagine I'll publish this first because I'm filming this first. The French version might come out later in the week. So we'll just start with our first question. I've kept them all anonymous, so I won't name and shame anyone for any of these questions. So the first question is, how can I develop my creative spirit? I've bought the materials, but I lack inspiration. And how do I build my self-confidence? I'm going to imagine the confidence is in relation to the creativity, right? So obviously, I don't have too many details here. This is dependent on what you're creating and your personal style. There are so many different variables here. So to start with a little quote. You know this expression, the wise speak because they have something to say, a fool speaks because they have to say something. The wise speak because they have something to say, fools speak because they have to say something. I think this doesn't just apply to speaking out loud. I think it applies to everything, and I think every time you undergo a creative process, you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? Do you just have this desperate urge to make something and to be seen and to be perceived, to create something worthy of praise? Or do you have something to say? You're trying to get a message across. So there are so many different reasons why you might be creating something. It might be that you really want to undergo the creative process of making something. You want something to fill your time, and you want to have a hobby, you want to have a passion project, something you can commit to. Is it because you've seen a finished product on Pinterest and you want to replicate something really beautiful? You want the end product to be incredible? Is it that you want to show it off to other people, or do you want to keep it private for yourself? Is it that maybe you want to master a technique? Do you want to become an incredible painter? Do you want to master shading when it comes to drawing? Or do you want to, figure out how to use all of the different Adobe whatever settings if you're a graphic designer? There are so many different questions, and I think with any creative process, it's important to ask yourself, what do I want out of this? Is it the finished product? Is it the creative process? What am I trying to do here? Why have I got this urge to create something? Do I have a message I really need to convey? These are all important questions to ask, and then you kind of work back from So if this were me, if I had this creative urge and I couldn't find any inspiration, I'd write down these questions and I'd answer them one by one. Am I trying to monetize something? If so, do I need to do market research? Do I need to figure out who's going to buy the things I'm making? If I want to master a technique, how am I going to do it? Am I going to draw the same picture over and over for 500 days and note where I've made mistakes and note how I could improve? If I want to make a really beautiful product, how much planning do I need to do? Do I have all the materials I need? I think these are all good starting points, and I think in many cases the thought needs to come before the process, or throughout the process as well, right? When you say confidence, is that you're scared that other people won't like the thing you've created? Do you have to show other people the thing you've created? Do you lack self-confidence, or do you think that if you fail the first time around it might put you off ever trying again, and you're scared that you're going to give up? Do you lack the confidence in your technique? Do you compare yourself to other people and think, wow, I wish I could do what they do, and you're kind of you're self-sabotaging your progress because you think, I'll never be like Picasso. Are you scared of wasting the materials you have? It's a really expensive project. Are you scared of wasting time? Are you scared that you're going to commit 10 years to a painting and then at the end of it realise that you don't actually like the painting, or you don't like anything it stands for? And if so, do you think you're setting yourself up for disappointment, and you know it in the back of your mind, so you're kind of putting off starting because you think, well, I know it's not going to be any good. And what is good? What is good for you? I think confidence can only come through practice, because if you don't try, you'll always have this image of what could have been. If I'd only started practicing drawing 10 years earlier, I could have been so good by now. And if you start practicing, you might think, oh good God, this is terrible, I'm so bad at this. But if you just commit to it and you keep trying and you're persistent with it, you'll succeed. And if you have these goals in mind of, I want to master this technique, or I want to create this beautiful end product, it might take you years and years and years to get there, but eventually you will get there. With all these things, practice makes perfect, which I know is cliche, but it's true. And maybe you've asked yourself all these questions already, and you're just overthinking it actually, and you're procrastinating, you're putting it off because you're scared of some failure. I think that's a big part of it, right? With confidence, everyone's scared of failure. So maybe you should just sit down. You should just sit down and you should start creating. You should get your materials out. You should set yourself however many hours you need and just start and see where it goes from there. And you will fail. There will be failures in any creative process. There has to be failure. And once you start and you learn from your failures, this is how creativity flourishes, and it's how confidence flourishes. And these failures might completely knock your confidence, but without those failures you're not going to improve. And that is the creative process. It's trial and error in a lot of cases, and to that extent creativity is the opposite of confidence. You need the failure and you need the rejection to improve. So I hope that makes sense. I hope there was some sage advice within all of that, but just get started on it. It doesn't have to be great. You don't have to show anyone. It can be your secret little project, and you can work on it to yourself. There's something quite chic about that, quite romantic about that. Our second question: I want to extend my employment contract because I love my job and the company's project, but I have toxic and sexist bosses. Any advice on how to deal with this? So, sorry to hear that. That sounds rough, and it's very difficult to weigh up the pros and cons in a situation like this. So the way this question is phrased is, I love my job and I love the company's project, but I hate my toxic and sexist bosses. So there's this binary, right? There's, I like this, I don't like this. Which in many kind of situations in life is a good way of weighing up kind of problem solving. It's I like this but I don't like this. I need to figure out where the balance lies. So obviously I don't know the structure of your company, so from a practical viewpoint, is there HR? Do you have does your boss have a boss you could report them to? Has it been escalated by other members of staff? Have your colleagues noticed the same toxicity? Have you spoken to other people about it? Are there ways it could be escalated? It can be quite scary to challenge the people above you, especially if, it's like a senior manager, or especially where there are lots of different people who are kind of contributing to the toxicity. Sometimes it's just one person that's a shit manager, but sometimes it's it's a group of managers and they're all kind of just throwing together this very toxic workplace, and it's very difficult to overthrow. Maybe you feel now you've escalated it, or you can't escalate it. Maybe there's no HR, maybe you have no evidence, you can't prove to anyone that your boss is toxic, and you really feel like they're not going anywhere. That's a kind of unwavering obstacle in your way to enjoying your job. And in this case you need to reassess this binary that you've put forward, because you've said I love my job, I love the project, but there are these negative toxic bosses that I'm having an issue with, and I'm gonna kind of rephrase this in the scenario of a relationship, right? So let's say you have a new partner, okay? You have a romantic partner, and you have so much in common, and they treat you so nicely, and they buy you gifts, and they're everything you could ever want in a person. They treat you so well. You feel happy and you feel fulfilled when you're around them, and everything is great when you're with them. But once a week you have to go to their parents' house, and their parents are horrible people, and their parents call you names when your partner's back is turned, and they treat you so awfully, and you've tried to tell your partner, and maybe they don't believe you. Maybe they say, oh well, my parents are just like that sometimes, or maybe they do believe you, but you know that they're never going to confront their parents, and you know that you can't confront their parents because they're family, right? And those parents aren't going anywhere. And the question is no longer, do I love my partner? Of course you love your partner's perfect. But the question is, do I like the relationship? And this is what we have here. The partner is the job, the parents are the bosses, and the relationship is the entire kind of work setting. And there are some shit instances in life where the goods come with the bads, and they're a set package, and you can't tear them apart, and in these situations you have to weigh up the pros and the cons. Are your bosses so toxic that you have to deal with it every day? Is it something that's really wearing on you? Are you witnessing them being toxic to other people? Are you personally victimized by it? If there's nothing you can do about it, if it's a completely unmovable obstacle, is it gonna get in your way? If it was a relationship, would you break up with them, or would you put up with it? And this is a question you have to ask with work, and work is a relationship. I know a lot of us work just for money. A lot of us wouldn't work in the jobs we work in if it went for the salary and the paycheck at the end of every month. But it takes so much of our time and so much of our mental capacity, our emotional capacity, work, and the people we work with are a massive part of that. And you can say you like the project. I love the project. I love the type of work I'm doing. I love the tasks that I do day to day. But your boss is as much part of the job as your day-to-day tasks, and you need to decide if nothing can be done about them. Are you going to break it off, or are you going to keep trying? And I guess the good thing about a job that you don't get typically in romantic relationships is you can be on the search for other jobs while you're still in this one. If you really feel that the bosses aren't going to change, you can't report them, you can't escalate it. You can look for jobs elsewhere while you're still in your role. And it's a shame, and it feels almost like you're being punished for someone else's toxicity, right? You know, other people are acting badly and you feel like you shouldn't have to move. But again, it's a relationship that you're part of. And if you can't change a relationship, you can only remove yourself. Definitely leave like a note in your notice to explain why you're leaving. Don't let them go unpunished. These toxic bosses, make sure they know why you've chosen to leave, if that is your choice. Hope that's helpful. It's a difficult thing to deal with, and only you can weigh up the pros and cons. Unfortunately, I can't help too much with question number 3. Do you think shortbread is the English equivalent of kouign, amann? I don't know how to pronounce that. This is a Breton pastry. I'd never heard of it before. It's a very good question. So the first important distinction to make, and I think the only distinction I'll make, is that shortbread is from Scotland and not England. So the answer is no, shortbread is not the English equivalent of kouign. But I'm very eager to try it. I'd never heard of it before this question, so thank you for bringing that to me. I'll definitely give it a go if I'm ever in Brittany. Question number 4 again is quite generic, so I'm just going to try and answer as best as I can based on personal experience. How can a person succeed under a lot of pressure and stress? And this is something I ask myself every day. You know, I suffer from anxiety terribly. I have done my whole life. I'm constantly stressed about the smallest little things, and I can fall into a cycle of stress very easily, and I tend to snowball, I tend to catastrophize everything. And I have had therapy for this. I had therapy last year, and it really did help me a lot. So I've got some techniques or some like kind of mindsets which I've taken from that, and I'll try and give these to you. Maybe this won't resonate with you whatsoever, but it resonated with me. So let's see if this is good advice. So from my personal experience, I've learned that stress has very little. Hear me out on this one. Stress has very, very little to do with the world around you, and it has everything to do with your reactivity. It has very little to do with, you know, the objects of stress, and everything to do with your reactivity. So I've got an example here. I wrote a little example. Let's say you've been made redundant from work, and it's so stressful as a situation. That objectively is a stressful situation, a stress-inducing situation. You are in a rush to get a new job, and you have financial concerns. You feel pressure to get a job as soon as possible, and you want to get your career back on track. You feel that you're just kind of in limbo, and you know your final day goes by and weeks turn into months, and you wake up and your heart is pounding and you feel sick and you don't feel like you want to eat. You're so stressed, and you've applied for hundreds of jobs, and every time you receive a new job application, rejection. Every time you receive a rejection for a new job application, your heart sinks a little bit more. You feel completely hopeless, and you're comparing yourself to your friends, you're comparing yourself to old colleagues. Maybe there's pressure from your partner or your family or your friends to get back to work, and you're dreading the worst. You're thinking, I'm never gonna get a job. This is awful. And maybe you're just completely paralyzed by stress. You find yourself just doing absolutely nothing because you've reached this level of hopelessness, really. But while all of these horrible, awful feelings have been going on for these awful months, these dreadful months, you've still been breathing, and you've been managing to keep alive, you've been managing to eat, maybe you've eaten some really good food. Maybe there was one day where a friend cracked a really funny joke and it made you smile or laugh. Maybe one night you had an incredible sleep, you slept so well. Maybe you watched a TV program which brought back so many pleasant memories. Maybe you laughed out loud. Maybe you listened to your favourite song and you had a good old sing-along in the shower. And what does this tell us, right? What does this tell us? That in all of that darkness, in all of that doom and gloom, even if it was just 1 second, even if it was 1 second of joy, the stress was absent from your mind. There was 1 second, maybe 5 seconds, maybe 5 minutes of this awful period where stress was absent from your mind. And the reality of being unemployed hadn't got anywhere. You were still unemployed, you were still redundant. There were still all of these same factors going on around you. But the stress vanished, albeit temporarily, And you found a moment of peace where you stopped reacting to those factors. And instead, you found yourself being present. Yeah, I'm using that word. I'm going to be using that word a lot in this video. And when you're really present, you're eating your favourite food, you're smiling, you're laughing with a friend, you're watching a programme that you really love, something that really resonates with you. You're present. And what you're doing, you're still reacting. You're reacting to the world, but you're reacting to a positive factor in it. And you're limiting your reactivity to everything else around it, to all of these external factors. So when you're present with your favourite song, or you're present with a friend and you're laughing and smiling, when you're eating your favourite food and thinking, wow, this is really tasty, I think they might have changed the recipe actually because this tastes better than it ever has before. You're limiting your reactivity to all of that external stress from, your job, from your partner, from your family, from, your mourning someone's death, all of these things. For some reason, your brain is able to cut off the stress. And as I said, I have a very anxious brain. And the anxious side of my brain tells me that if I stress, I'll be prepared for all eventualities. Okay, it tells me that if I don't succeed, at least I won't be disappointed because I'll have thought out every eventual outcome. That's what the anxious side of my brain says. But then there's the rational side of my brain, which learns through experience. And my life experience has told me that no matter how much I stress about something beforehand, it's not going to prevent disappointment. I'll still be equally as disappointed if I don't get the result I want. And even though I've preemptively stressed about every possible outcome of a situation, I've still been shocked by the outcome in so many instances. I've stressed beforehand about, something bad's gonna happen, or I'm not gonna get this and this, or, maybe this bad thing will happen to me. And then when it happens, I'm still surprised by it. I'm still devastated by it. Or alternatively, something good happens, and I think I've wasted so much time stressing about something which turned out to be fine. And this stress, either way, whether the outcome has been good or bad, this stress has always just been a massive waste of my time. And so from all of this, I ask myself out loud, I would literally say to myself, this is an imminent worry, it's an imminent stress that I can do something about. Or this is a distant stress and there is nothing I can do about this. And you need to break it down. You can't just say redundancy is an imminent stress. What about the redundancy is imminent? Okay, the financial worry is imminent, so I need to be able to pay for my groceries this week. That's an imminent stress. A distant stress would be, I'm going to be poor. What if I have no money? What if I never get to buy a house? What if I X, Y, and Z? And it's all these what if questions that add up, and it adds to this whole kind of bubble of stress. And what you really need to do is you need to figure out, oh, this is what I tell myself, right? Maybe not for you, but I find I need to figure out exactly what I can action, what can I do. And then with those things, I write a to-do list. You know, I'm going to wake up at 9 a.m. I'm going to apply for 20 jobs at 10 a.m. At 11 a.m. I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to go to the toilet. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to make some breakfast at 11:30. Just write down a really simple list, and making things simple for yourself really is a good way of minimizing stress. And then with each task, I try being as present as I can. For the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to do this task. I'm just going to do this thing on my to-do list for the next 10 minutes and just handle it bit by bit. Because if you try and deal with everything all at once, you'll make no progress and you'll feel so much worse for it. And if I find that stress just keeps creeping up on me, if there's a little niggling thought in the back of my mind and I can't get rid of it, and I've tried so hard to be present, but I just can't stop feeling anxious about this one thing, then I'll allocate time. I'll put it on my to-do list. I'll say, okay, well, I'm gonna do all I need to do for the day, and then at 7 p.m. I'm gonna get in the shower, and from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'm gonna allocate myself 3 hours where I can worry to my heart's content. I can stress, I can cry, I can panic, I can feel sorry for myself, I can have an absolute pity party for myself. But by the time 10 o'clock comes, I'm going to carry on with my next task, because then you're being present even through the stress. You're being present, but you're managing to find this time elsewhere in the day where you're still being present and being productive. I hope that's helpful. This is how I've kind of formed my own thoughts of my stress and my anxiety. Again, if you're getting really stressed and you find that you're so overwhelmed by it, please seek professional help. But for the odd bit of stress, where you feel it is manageable without help, I hope that what I've said is useful. Number 5 is a really good question. A friend asked me for advice and I wasn't sure what to tell her. Your perspective might be helpful. She started her first year of journalism school in September. In France, journalism studies last an average of 3 years, so it's like a bachelor's degree, right? And she's very anxious about studying in a field where artificial intelligence, AI, could do better in 10 years. She's wondering if it's really worth it. What advice would you give her? Do you think AI will quickly replace humans in music, literature, or other fields? Really interesting question, and AI is something which panics me as well. I think it panics a lot of people. Firstly, good for your friend. That sounds like a really good thing. Congrats to her for getting into journalism school. And I think one of the main negatives from which we can find a positive is that AI is taking over absolutely every sector. Legal, medical, administrative, the arts and the humanities, literature. AI is seeping in absolutely everywhere. So I think the good part of that is your friend isn't the only victim. Your friend isn't, it's not just journalists who are going to see these changes. This is a worldwide, completely unilateral, I don't know if that's the right word, but that's the word I'm going to use, technological advancement, right? I imagine it's like the Industrial Revolution when all these new machines came in and everyone was panicking, no one knew which careers were safe, which of these like traditional trades were safe. All of a sudden you've just got this brand new technology which seems to be replacing people. And a bit like the last question, right, about anxiety, we can ask ourselves, is my job going to be safe in 10 years? I ask myself, is my job going to be safe in 10 years? I won't tell you what my job is, but I'm not a journalist, I can tell you that. But all of it is completely hypothetical. And I think, I don't mean this to be remotely patronising, but your friend is entering university, and entering journalism school, right? So that's actually such a distant fear. You know, will this job that I don't yet have be replaced by AI? It's good to be prepared for different eventualities, right? But I think some things are so far in the distance that there are way too many different hypothetical variables to this. So there are so many benchmarks for your friend, right, before she even gets to that point. You know, she might go to journalism school and after a year drop out, decide actually journalism is not what I thought it would be and I absolutely hate it. Or she might quite like journalism, but she might start a side hustle. She might join a rock band. She might learn to play the guitar and decide actually I want to go on a world tour and I want to be a musician for the rest of my life. She might fail her exams. Hopefully not. Fingers crossed she doesn't. But there are so many different threats to her career outside of AI. But AI is this kind of big looming tsunami, and it feels like it's kind of coming for all of us. And AI is a threat to careers. I can't lie and say, and yeah, she'll be fine. AI is a threat to careers, but this is a career that she doesn't have yet, and she might choose to stay away from. And I think journalism school sounds so good, and not just because journalism school is a subject. I think any of the arts and literature are very cool things to study. But because it's going to teach us so many transferable skills. And I think when you leave uni and you get to the kind of world of work, I know I work with people who have completely different degrees to me. You know, I work with people that have like science degrees, law degrees, all different types of degrees. You know, I did history and French at uni, so the degree you leave uni with isn't necessarily, you know, it's not set in stone that you're going to be a journalist because you have a journalism degree. Instead, you leave with this qualification which shows I'm really good at critical thinking, I'm really good at communication, my written skills are incredible. You know, you have this qualification which says, yeah, I have a qualification in journalism, but it speaks so much more than that. You know, there are so many more skills which it shows off. So I wouldn't be put off going for journalism. I think journalism is such a good subject for showing those transferable skills, since I have mentioned that AI has infiltrated all parts of life and it is really scary. I want to also bring my kind of positive thoughts on it. So I mean, you could, I don't know if you'll consider this positive. In my head, this is a positive way of thinking. So AI, like all technology, has been created for two reasons, as far as I'm concerned. One is to make rich people richer. You know, it's to make these CEOs of these big tech companies super uber duper rich. And the second reason is to help people, whether that's to, you know, help find cures for illnesses, or it's to help companies with administrative tasks, or it's to help speed up the rate of, you know, some type of scientific progress. It could be any of these things. And if AI, it's already in every sector. You see it all over the place. You see it in everything. And if it does replace the vast majority of jobs, there will be so much unemployment. There would be so much unemployment. And the governments would be so strained, the you know, on a universal scale. And I think if everyone were unemployed, the wheels of capitalism would slow down. They'd stop turning eventually, because regular people, working people, wouldn't have money to spend. And if the working people don't have money to spend, you lose a consumer market. If there are no consumers, there are no more companies. You know, these big tech CEOs won't have any customers because no one's buying anything. No one's buying what they're selling. If there's no consumer market, there's just no demand for anything whatsoever. And if there's no demand, then AI can't thrive because these tech companies won't have any customers, basically. And, you know, people would be rioting against technology, and I just can't see a world we would allow technology to replace us, and we'd all just be sat around like lemons, kind of, oh, that machine took my job. That's not the human way, and it never has been. If you look at like the Industrial Revolution, people were so scared about machines, and jobs did change. People went from these rural farm lives to working machines in big cities, but jobs were created through the technology. So I really struggled to put that into words, but my point is that it's in nobody's best interest. Not CEOs, not governments, not working people. It's not in anybody's best interest for AI to take over all jobs. And I think it's refreshing to see that so many people already hate AI, and it's kind of clogging our social media. You'll scroll through TikTok and it's an AI cat video or whatever, or people are boycotting AI animation in films. People are boycotting AI journalism. There are these awful AI books which have been terribly written, and it's not necessarily because the quality's bad. It's not necessarily, AI animation in films is terrible, but it's because people know that it's AI, and people don't like AI out of principle. People don't like the fact that a human hasn't made this. AI art is absolutely awful. It's absolutely awful, and it's because it's been untouched by human hands. It's the humanity which makes the art. And I'd go as far as to say that I think that art especially will be protected, because the entire point of a lot of art is the creative process of it. It's the this barista made this coffee and did this beautiful latte art, or this journalist wrote this really interesting piece based on her life experiences, and there's a humanity in the arts which everyone craves. I saw this really interesting piece of theatre with all of these very talented actors. I think these are things that technology can't replace, because people love the journey of art, if that makes sense. And I think there's something about humanity which we all long for. We all want it. It's the reason that we evolve as a species. It's the reason that we crave relationships with other people. It's the reason that we hug people or hold hands. It's the reason that we watch YouTube videos. We feel this need to listen to people or speak with people. It's why we serve other people. It's why we're selfless sometimes. And AI objectively just goes against all of our human instincts. And I think there will always be a very, very large and active audience for human-made art, human work, because that's literally why we live. We live to evolve, and we live to love, and we live to serve. And I'm not a tech expert. I don't know where AI is going to go, but I'm confident that humans are going to carry on being humans, as we always have, and we're going to continue working. We're going to continue showing love to each other. We're going to continue working together as we always have done, and this is just one wave of history. It's another wave of history. There was the Bronze Age, we had the Renaissance, we had the Industrial Revolution, we had the creation of the internet, and AI is next. And people are freaked out at every single one of these points in history. And ours is the scariest because it's the one that we're in right now. I hope that's helpful. I hope I've given some semi-positive insight there. And to question number 6. There's a boy at my school I really like, but I don't know his name, age, or even his grade. I've said school, I think it's college, or like 6th form would be the English equivalent. I think he's older than me. I'd love to talk to him, but I don't know how. I see him a lot and we look at each other, but I don't want to get my hopes up. Do you have any advice? The throes of love. So I've had so many crushes in my life. I fall in love with people ridiculously quickly. I'm such a romantic person. I romanticize absolutely everything, and it's so unhelpful. It's so impractical and silly, but it's one of those exciting things about life. So I think the first thing to note is that crushes and love and fancying people, it's an exciting and it's a fun and it's a happy part of life, and be careful not to let it become a stress in your life. Be careful not to let it become the anxiety of your life, trying to get this one person to like you back, because there's a good chance you'll move on, as I'm sure you have before, and I definitely have moved on from all of my many crushes over the years. So easy to see a stranger, an attractive stranger, and put them on a pedestal, and maybe you get nervous when you see them, maybe your heart starts pounding a bit, or maybe you psych yourself up to go and speak to him, but then you think, oh, actually I'm way too nervous, and you psych yourself out a little bit. And basically what that means is you're spending time away from him, and you make up these, I'm speaking for myself, right? You start making up these imaginary scenarios about people. You think, oh, wouldn't it be great if he just came over here and gave me his number? Or maybe you've gone extra wild and you've pictured your wedding day together, and you've thought about what your kids would look like, or all these crazy kind of things. Or maybe you've already made up a name for him in your head, like you don't know what he's called, but you've got a little nickname that you call him. Or maybe he wears baggy jeans, and you've convinced yourself that he has a really good taste in music because he has a slightly alternative fashion sense. Or maybe you take signs. Maybe you see all these signs about you being soulmates that don't exist. Maybe you walked past him and he was eating your favourite flavour of crisp, and you thought, oh my god, we must be soulmates because I like prawn cocktail crisps, And basically you're depriving yourself of the reality. And when you do that, I think our brains are very naturally inquisitive. Our brains are always trying to solve problems. That's how we survive as a species. Our brains always trying to figure things out and fill the gaps. And what you've got is a boy who you don't know the name of. You don't know anything about him, really. And so your brain is running overtime, trying to figure out, okay, well, I wonder what his name is, and I wonder what he likes, and I wonder what he doesn't like, and I wonder what he thinks of me, and I wonder why he did that, and I wonder why he looked at me this way, and I wonder this, I wonder that, I wonder this, I wonder that. And you basically end up with an imaginary friend. You end up with this completely non-existent person. And I've done this so many times, believe me, I've got so many imaginary boyfriends I've accumulated over the years, which are just my projections of people that don't exist. He exists, the boy you're looking at exists, but the person that's in your head, the boy in your head, doesn't exist. He might exist, but you've never given yourself the chance to actually find that out. You've deprived yourself of the chance to see if he exists. And the longer you wait, the longer you let your brain work overtime trying to figure it out, the more disappointed you're going to be when you walk up to him one day, maybe in 5 years' time, and you realise, oh my god, this is not who I thought it was. You're not this romanticised version that I've made up in my head. And it's not fair to you, and it's not fair to him either. And then again, you get nervous because he's on this pedestal. So you need to remind yourself that he's a human being, okay? He might look amazing, but if you get too close, you might find that he smells quite bad. Or maybe he's really friendly. You saw him smile at someone, so you think he's the friendliest guy I've ever seen. But then if you actually got to know him, you'd find that he's always laughing at other people's expense, and he's a bit of a jerk. Or maybe he wears a t-shirt with a band you like, and you think, oh my god, we have the same music taste. But then you ask him, and it turns out he actually doesn't know who the band is, and his sister's t-shirt, he just nicked it from a wardrobe. There are all these different things, and he could be absolutely anyone. But for some reason, your brain has formed this like instinctive connection to him, and that's all it is. It's your brain's kind of gotten attached to a foreign object. So you have two options here. You can either try and detach. You can tell yourself, I've made this all up in my head, I need to move on. Or you can try and meet the real him. So if you want to dive in, if you're a very confident person, you want to dive in and you want to figure things out as soon as possible, you could just walk up to him and say, hey, can I have your number? I fancy you. And some people are like this, right? I think it's a minority of people who are like this, but you could just go up and ask for his number. Some people do have the audacity just to ask people out. I wish I had that confidence. I don't. And in that case, you have to be willing to accept the rejection outright. You know, you could ask him on a date and he'll say, no, absolutely not. Or he'd say, yeah, I'll go on a date with you, in which case you've started those first steps towards figuring out who is this person and kind of solving this mystery that you've put together in your brain. But based on the wording of your question, I imagine you're a bit more like me. You're a little bit more cautious and you fear rejection a little bit more. So in these instances, I have found through trial and error that the best way to approach a crush is to treat it with curiosity. Ask questions to yourself and show an interest in them. So you're not trying to be mysterious. I think when you try and be mysterious, it can come across as rude, it can come across as childish, because a stranger is a mystery. You're already mysterious because he has no idea who you are, most likely. So you want to avoid being mysterious where possible. The goal here is to get closer to him, not further away from him. Something that's worked for me is trying to give signals of being kind and approachable. I like to be approached. I'm very shy about asking people out, again, because I have issues with rejection. I fear rejection. So instead, I make myself as available as possible. And if I fancy someone, in the past, right, if I fancied someone, I'd give them signs that they can approach me if they want to, that I'm open to conversation. So this might look like, you walk past him in the corridor and he's wearing a cool t-shirt and you say, oh, I really like that t-shirt. That's all you have to say. It doesn't have to spiral into a conversation. It might spiral into a conversation, or you might say, oh, thanks, and walk away. But what you're doing is you're kind of slowly creeping up on his radar. You're putting yourself on his map, even if you're just kind of up in the corner somewhere. You're putting yourself in his subconscious brain. And I'm not saying this in some kind of like mind game thing, but this is just, genuinely how I would form a connection with someone. And it makes approaching him feel a bit less like a drastic thing to do. And it'll also help you kind of read the room a bit more, see if he's willing to start a conversation, or if he's closed off, or if he ignores you, or whatever. If he's reading a book, you could ask what he's reading, or if he recommends it, or if he's listening to, I don't know. It's difficult without knowing the exact kind of context in which you see him. But just when you make eye contact with him, smile at him. He doesn't have to be like a chucky smile. It can just be like a sweet little smile. And it goes a long way. It really does. These are all like subconscious little semi-conscious things that people do take on board. And if you smile at him, he might just start smiling back, and then it could develop from there. But just let it develop organically. And if you're a girl, it can be quite difficult to be active in pursuing people. There's this like stigma, I guess, against girls making the first move or whatever, and it can be very easy to panic about how you're being perceived, right? We always hear like women are the object of desire, and the men pursue the women, and with that comes this expectation for you to present yourself in the best possible way. But how he perceives you is his issue, and the entire time that you're around him, every time you see him, you need to remind yourself that you're investigating him, okay? You're not passive, you're not an object on a shelf waiting to be picked up. You're figuring him out, and you're making a decision as well. You need to focus on not on how he perceives you, but on how you perceive him. That's really important. But again, without trying to make up all these little imaginary stories and putting him on a pedestal, you need to try and be as objective as you can with that. And remember, you can't control him, you can't control his reaction, you can't control whether he likes you or not. Even if you've already convinced yourself that you're soulmates, you might find that he does reject you, or you might find that he isn't the person you thought he was and he actually doesn't go anywhere. And he will have flaws because he's a human being, and you'll only discover them if you take that first step towards knowing the real him. If you find that you're still putting him on a pedestal and you're incapable of seeing any flaws and he's just the most perfect boy you've ever seen in your life, one little task that I did, or I still do with myself, if you're intimidated by someone, or you're just in absolute admiration of someone, and you find yourself thinking, he has beautiful eyes, try and flip it on yourself and say, he has beautiful eyes, but I have beautiful hair. Or, he looks like he's the kindest person in the world, but I have the best sense of humour in the world. And you want to try and turn that admiration for someone else towards yourself. And you want to remind yourself, he might be great, but I definitely am great. I know for certainty that I'm a great person. And if you're always improving yourself and loving yourself and working on yourself, it's almost like he's on a pedestal, and maybe something in your brain just won't let you take him off this pedestal. So instead of bringing him down, you need to put yourself on a pedestal even higher than his. And I don't mean that in a mind game way. I mean that in a respect for yourself. I think he's great. He's on this pedestal, but in that case, I need to put myself on equal footing, so that I'm not too flustered to speak to this absolute stranger. Right? I feel that one made absolutely no sense, but I hope something resonated with you. Good luck with it, and remember, it's a fun time of life. It's a fun aspect of life. So please don't let it bring you down or knock your confidence. Number 7, how to navigate open relationships / casual friendships with physical connection / a polyamorous approach. How to communicate, establish boundaries, avoid jealousy, and work with different attachment styles. This is not something I have experience with, I can't lie. The cliche answer is you need to communicate, right? Communication is key. Everyone says communication is important. Imagine for you to be in a consenting open relationship or polyamorous relationship or even friends with benefits. I imagine that you've already had pretty good discussions with your partner about how it's going to work. I imagine that communication isn't the issue here. I think these situations require an obsessive amount of honesty. You have to be honest. These things don't work if you're not honest, because someone will end up beating themselves up, or someone will end up resenting the other person. I think honesty is key in all relationships, right? But especially in these types of relationships. I would imagine that the hardest bit is, I think for me, the hardest bit would be being honest with yourself and knowing your own boundaries, because you have to be so emotionally intelligent to enter these situations. You can't just do it on a whim. Being emotionally intelligent, I don't mean that you don't get jealous or that you don't feel emotion, but it's that you are consistently able to check in with yourself and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? And ask yourself very consistently, very frequently, what do I actually want right now in the present? What do I want? Do I want the physical side of it? Do I want to be loved? Do I want to love someone else? Do I have a lot of love to give? Do I want to explore myself, explore my sexuality? lots of different questions you need to ask to really master your emotions as much as you can within human nature. So similar to that scenario I mentioned earlier, one thing I would be asking myself frequently is, do I want the relationship? Do I want the workings of the relationship, the lifestyle, or do I want the person or the people in it? You know, the relationship is this whole picture and all the feelings that come with it. The existence of a polyamorous relationship. And if you find yourself answering that question with, actually, I want the people in it, I want this person, or I want that person, or I want both of the people, you'll find that you're far more willing to break your own boundaries. Because when you fixate on a person rather than a relationship, you know, when you fixate on a goal, this person is my goal, you find yourself leaning towards their boundaries. You're willing to kind of break yourself a little bit further to get them. And again, we put people on pedestals, right? So I think if you find yourself wanting the person and not necessarily wanting the relationship and the lifestyle itself, you need to reassess. Maybe you've got a bit of an action plan and you've told yourself, if I get jealous, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. But maybe you haven't asked yourself, what am I gonna do if my partner gets jealous? Or what am I gonna do if we bring someone else into the relationship and they get jealous? And you can't prepare for those eventualities because you don't necessarily know these other people very well that are gonna be partaking in the relationship. There are lots of different variables and you can't prepare for all of them. And it's very easy to be honest. I think once you've kind of established that base level of honesty with each other, it's quite easy to maintain honesty and communicate your emotions. But honesty doesn't fix all issues. There are some issues that can't be solved. If you want polar opposites, if you reach a point in the relationship where you realise you want the exact opposite of what this other person wants, you reach a point where you're both stretching so far in the other direction that a compromise still feels quite radical for both of you, and it's not going to work. So you have to kind of set yourself up to be prepared for these changes. And I think if you're going to be in a relationship which contains lots of different people, you know, people are coming and going, you need to prepare yourself that you can't foresee all eventualities, and it could end in heartbreak, as all relationships can, right? Because there are variables outside of romantic experiences which impact all relationships. Every single person that enters that relationship, no matter what context that's in, they have to be on the same wavelength. Once you've established your objectives and your boundaries with each other, everyone that comes into that relationship has to be on that same wavelength so that it doesn't kind of mess with the status quo of the relationship. And the more people that get involved, the more difficult that's going to be, because you've got new emotions, you've got new lifestyles, you've got new personalities, you've got new opinions which are being thrown into the mix. And this is why, for me, I think, you know, one partner is enough for me, because I'm already trying to figure out my partner and deal with all the. I love my partner. I'm not making it sound like a challenge, but it is a challenge. There are challenges to all relationships, and I am all for open relationships. I think it's so great that people are challenging these societal norms of, you know, these nuclear families or monogamous relationships, if we can call them that. But the relatively sad reality is that society is geared towards two-person relationships, set up for these traditional family values and these traditional two-person relationships. And again, it's so great that people are trying to break out of that norm and say, actually, there are different lifestyles which work, and we don't have to follow these Christian whatever values, or whatever it is. But in this day and age, people are going to question it. You are going to struggle, and it is going to be difficult because society isn't set up to support you, and that's a shame on society, right? Not on you, not on your choice of lifestyle. But yeah, you'll find that people around you don't understand it, and you might find that even within yourself you have these internalized beliefs that you really have to think through, and you might have repressed some kind of traditional family values, and there's a subconscious part of your brain that's kind of beating itself up a bit, and these are things you have to be prepared for, because there are so many learned behaviours and learned attitudes that can take a while to unlearn. And you might also find that your vision is different to the vision that your partner has, right? So I'm sorry that I can't give I have no experience of this, right? So I'm just talking out my ass a bit, but I hope that's given you something to think about. Number 8. Do you have any tips on self-expression, moulding to social spaces, rediscovering a sense of self, and authenticity? I do have thoughts on this. I firmly believe that authenticity is a lie that we tell ourselves. We go through different trends, we go through different phases, we listen to music, and we try so hard to categorize ourselves. We try so hard to be the goth girl, or to be the clean girl, or to be the hustler, or to be the gym bro, or to be whatever. We try so hard to put ourselves into these boxes so that we can package ourselves beautifully and sell it to the world. We can present ourselves in this, beautifully curated display case, and show the world. I say that everything you do in life is authentic. I think you're authentic when you dress up for Halloween. I think you're authentic when you yell at your parents. I think you're authentic when you take a nap. I think you're authentic when you go to the toilet. I think you are authentic when you went through your My Chemical Romance phase. I think you're authentic when you're rotting in bed all day. I think you're authentic when you catch a bug and you're throwing up. I think you're authentic 24/7. You can't be anything other than yourself. You physically cannot be anything other than yourself and present. You can't live in the future, you can't live in the past. And you can try and put on an act, right? I think this is the idea of authenticity, is this person's being fake, or this person's not being true to herself and true to her values. You can try and put on an act around other people, even if you put on an act, even if you feel that you're I'm not actually kind of putting on display the values that I hold, or maybe I'm not presenting myself in a way which actually represents what I believe. That act is still something you've created. That act is still something that you're undergoing. It's something you're doing, and you're being in the moment, even when you're acting out, even if you're completely embarrassing yourself trying a new fashion look. You've styled this outfit which is not you whatsoever, and you look an absolute fool. You're still authentic in being that fool, or maybe you're in a conversation with a friend and she's just being so boring and she won't shut up and she's yapping your ear off, and you're desperate to scream, please just shut up, be quiet. You're dying to tell your friend to shut up, but you choose not to. You choose to sit and listen. You're being genuine in that act of kindness, and it's not that you're not being true to yourself, because my true self would have told my friend to shut up. My true self wouldn't have worn that silly outfit I wore the other day. That was you did do that. And I think authenticity, again, it's a way of you create this perfected, finalized version of yourself in your mind. I have like almost like a Pinterest style version of myself, which I've got in my head. I'm never going to be that person. Or maybe I will. Maybe I'll wear the clothes that I imagine myself wearing, and I'll live in the house I imagine myself living in. But that's not who I'm going to be. That's not who I'm going to be. That's how I'm going to look. That's going to be a circumstance of my life. It'll be part of who I am, but it won't be the entirety of who I am. Because we all have an image, we all have a self-image, or maybe we have like a series of images of who we'd like to be, or I think my authentic self is, X, Y, and Z. But who you are isn't just your image, and it's not your personality. It's the way you feel, it's the way you observe the world. It's not just the way the world observes you, it's the way you observe the world. It's the way you react to different things. It's the way that, if you use a bio-washing up liquid, your hands get a little bit itchy. It's the way that you're allergic to peanuts. That's you. That's who you are. It's not just the clothes you wear or the way you react to people and the conversations you have. It's every single instance of your existence. Every single aspect of your existence is who you are, and that is authenticity. Being alive, being present, and existing is to be authentic. Number 9, thoughts on manifestation and the stars not aligning. As I've discussed already, I'm a very, very anxious person, and in my opinion, and again, this is my belief. This is what I believe, and it's how I choose to live my life. Everyone's different. I think that manifestation is synonymous with overthinking. As an anxious person, I try very hard. I make a very active effort to stay clear of anything which detracts me from being present. As I've said so many times in this video. Sorry, it's starting to sound like a broken record. And for me, I found far more success in this way of thinking, and it prevents disappointment ultimately, because you'll see so many people online who they're wealthy and beautiful and seemingly happy, and they'll tell you, I manifested all of this. I manifested this, because manifestation is so chic. Spirituality is so chic, and manifestation is particularly chic at the moment, and they'll never tell you actually, actually I worked really hard to get the body I have, or actually I worked really hard to make the money I have, or actually I'm not happy whatsoever because everything I portray on social media is a lie. You don't hear any of those things. So I think we see these successful people, or maybe they're like gatekeeping their success, and they'll say, I just manifested it, and I don't believe it. I think a lot of it is hard work, and the rest of it I put down to coincidence or good luck. Of course, we all have different beliefs. If you believe in manifestation, if you think it works for you, then I guess if I were you, I'd like try and find a way to bring it into my everyday life. I'd maybe allocate myself like manifestation time before bed or whatever. I don't really know how it works. But when it comes to my belief that manifestation isn't a real thing, I feel really empowered through that. I feel that not believing in manifestation has given me back a sense of control. I feel that I can work towards things, I can set goals, and I know that I might not be able to predict the future, but I'm also comfortable in knowing that I've done what I can, and I can be proactive, and I can be determined in my goals, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay. And I think it would be terrifying if manifestation really worked. It would be so scary. And the same with the stars aligning. I don't know if this has like a specific meaning from like an astrological term, but I'm taking it to mean like things don't work out as you want. One thing I've tried telling myself when things don't go well for me is that if the stars aren't aligned for me, it's maybe because they're busy aligning for someone else, and maybe it's just not my turn to receive that good karma. So maybe I've got jobs on the brain. Maybe you apply for a job and you don't get it, and I could have the perspective of the stars didn't align for me. But a healthier perspective, I think, would be, I didn't get the job because someone else maybe deserved it more than I do. Maybe I said something wrong in the interview, and next time I could be a little bit more careful about what I say or how I phrase myself. Maybe I don't win the lottery, and it's because someone else might have had the good fortune to win the lottery. Maybe they needed it so much more than I do. Maybe I miss my bus. And I see the bus driver drive away, and I think, why couldn't he just stay for one more minute to let me on the bus? But then I remember that bus already has 50 passengers on it, and they all have somewhere to be, and they're all going to get there on time because of my misaligned stars, and quite often our losses in life, our failures in life, things that don't go well for us, it's sometimes because the universe is looking out for someone else on that occasion. And even in situations where other people don't benefit, if someone passes away or something really awful happens, I feel that every worry in life strengthens me somehow. And you can say, I wish this hadn't happened, I wish something else had happened. What's the Lord of the Rings quote? I think Pippin says I wish this never happened, and Gandalf says, so do all who live to see such times. But all we can do is but that's not our decision to make. All we can do is decide what to do with the opportunities given to us, something like that. So, in the words of Gandalf, you can only work with the opportunities that are given to you, and if an opportunity isn't afforded to you, then it's a shame, but you can live and you can learn from it. Wasting your time really on wishing for a reality which never existed. You're wishing for something which never happened and it was never going to happen. And regret is the most pointless of all emotions. You can't do anything with regret. You can just learn from mistakes and move on. Learn for next time. Our last question. I have quite a few problems and I'd like some advice from a neutral person. I've been feeling really bad for a few years now, and unfortunately it's getting worse with each passing year. I have more and more issues with it, and I feel like I'm going crazy. I've seen 2 therapists, but I'm still not getting any better. And I'm on antidepressants for the 2nd time, sertraline. Yet I haven't been diagnosed. I'm trying to get better, but it's difficult. Do you have any advice for feeling less depressed on a daily basis? I'm so sorry to hear that you're going through this. I've struggled with depression in my life. It's so numbing. It can be so numbing. It's so it's really difficult to live with, and I really wouldn't wish it on my worst enemies. Obviously the first thing to note is, not just for the person who wrote the question, but for everyone, is if you're going through this, please do seek professional help. There are landlines you can call, you can speak to your doctor, you can seek out a therapist. There are lots of options, but please just never hesitate to get help. The worst case scenario is you feel the same as you already do, right? You can only benefit from it. So in response to this question, I don't think I can give too much practical advice because I'm not sure where this is, and I'm not sure how the health services work wherever you are. So first thing I guess to note is that doctors and therapists unfortunately are human beings, right? And that means some of them are terrible, some of them don't help whatsoever. Some of them, however, are fantastic, and like all human interactions, sometimes, one therapist will resonate with you. Something they say will just click in your brain, and something another therapist says might not click with you whatsoever. And it might not be the case that they're a good or a bad therapist. It might just be that their particular way of phrasing things isn't helpful to you. And with doctors have different opinions, right, on different things. Some doctors recommend certain medications, whereas others would advise that you stay clear. So if you have an option to switch therapists, maybe that'd be a good call if you feel that you're not making progress with your therapist. I had a therapist who I found so completely unhelpful, and I used to just dread going to therapy, and then after therapy I wouldn't feel any better. I wasn't given any coping techniques or anything. It was such an awful experience. And then I had my last year's therapist. I went to therapy last year for my anxiety, actually, and everything she said just kind of resonated with me. She was around my age, and everything she said I just felt was far more relatable, and it made what she said far easier for me to understand. So I guess it's just a bit of a lottery, right? You might get a therapist who you have nothing in common with, or is incapable of kind of really understanding your issues, or you might get a therapist who actually really is able to communicate with you in the way that you need. So if you can swap out doctors or therapists, see if that's an option. Maybe again, medication, like doctors, some of them work, some of them don't. Some of them are a good match, some of them aren't. It's the same with all medication. You can get side effects and all types of things. I was lucky. I was on metazapine for about 8 years. I actually came off it at the end of last year. And I know for probably about the first 4 or 5 months, I felt worse than I had pre-antidepressant. I felt terrible. I was so groggy. I felt so depressed. It was the worst I've ever felt, actually, when I went on those antidepressants. But again, it's an effect of antidepressants, and eventually they kicked in and my body got used to them. My body acclimatized to antidepressants, and I used them for years and years, and I feel they really worked for me. All of these things are trial and error, which it's not very comforting to hear that. It's not comforting to hear. You might have to try a new therapist, you might have to try a new medication. If you can, you need to try finding hope in that, and reassuring yourself that right now my therapist is shit, my medication might be shit, but there are other options out there. I haven't exhausted all the options, and it's like any other illness, right? If you had an infection somewhere in your body and you tried an antibiotic and it didn't work, you wouldn't just say, oh well, I'm destined to have this infection for life. You'd say, okay, well, what other medications can we try? Can we try an operation? Can we try administering it differently? And depression is an illness. I know when I had my depressive episodes, there were points where I was so far into it I couldn't even remember the last time I'd laughed, or I couldn't even imagine ever being happy again. I really couldn't see myself being happy because I was so steeped in all this pain and just this kind of brain fog. But nobody is too far gone. I promise you this, nobody is too far gone that they can't get help. Everyone can be helped. There's no threshold that once you've passed it, you're never going to get better again. You can go into the absolute depths of depression and you can still make it back out again. And it can seem really overwhelming, but it's doable. help people do it, and you can do it. Something that worked for me when I was in those depressive episodes would be just reminding myself, I've been through this before and I came out the other end, and now I've slipped back into a depression, but I know I can wait it out. I know I can wait it out. And I might feel shit for the next year. I might have a year where I feel absolutely awful. I'm not going to achieve any of my goals. I'm going to eat badly. I'm not going to look after myself very well. But I know that I will come out of the other end because I've done it before and other people have done it before. And there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. It might just be a very long tunnel. You just can't read the future, unfortunately. And sometimes you just want reassurance that the pain's going to go away. And I can promise you the pain will go away. The pain will eventually go away. Your body won't let you feel this pain for the rest of your life. So I've got some little daily tips which might sound a bit daft, right? They might sound very trivial, and you might, depending on kind of your depression, you might say these are ridiculous, and yeah, I'm just kind of stating the obvious here. But these are things which have helped me personally, and I can only speak from personal experience, right? So the first thing is listening to music. Music has such an incredible power to change the way I feel. If I can wake up in the morning and put on a 90s chick flick soundtrack, my brain does find it easier to romanticize my life, and my morning coffee just tastes a little bit nicer. Or if I'm on the opposite end of my depression, I feel absolutely terrible and I haven't left bed, I'll put on Radiohead, or I'll put on something really grungy or something really sad. I'll put some really sad music on, and I'll just cry, and I'll cry and I'll cry and I'll cry, and I'll purge it until I can't cry anymore, and then I'll either fall asleep or I'll say, okay, pity party's over now. I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna brush my teeth. I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna make myself some dinner. I think music is very good at kind of facilitating whatever emotion I need to get out of my system. My second point is definitely stating the obvious, but social media is terrible. If you have depression or anxiety and you're scrolling through social media, you're experiencing, if you like scrolling through Instagram Reels or TikTok, whatever, you're experiencing 1,000 emotions a minute, because you're seeing all these different videos. One will be like a sad animal rescue video, the next video will be some kind of comedy, the next one will be some quiz, the next one will be some silly AI trash, and your brain isn't, humans aren't made to deal with that amount of information in one go. So your brain is, whether you notice it consciously or subconsciously, is being so overstimulated, and you're emotionally fatigued by it. It's easy to say stop scrolling, but I can't stop myself from scrolling, so I'll delete Instagram, I'll delete whatever else I have. YouTube's the one I find hard to delete because I do rely on ASMR, but I'll limit all access to shorts that I can, and instead I'll go on Pinterest. Or there are other apps as well for like language learning, or for for like history learning, all kinds of different apps that have been created for mental health, or apps that have been created for kind of scrolling but learning at the same time rather than doom scrolling. Personally, I go on Pinterest and I will say, okay, for the next hour I'm going to look at cake recipes, and I'll just scroll through Pinterest, and my brain's, I'm still scrolling, I'm still feeling that need to scroll, but I'm doing it in a way which is relatively productive, and that my brain's only having to deal with one emotion, and that emotion is, wow, I really fancy a piece of cake. You can't control everything that you take in, but you can make little changes so that what you're consuming isn't quite as toxic. So you could go back to absolute basics. You could watch your favourite childhood programme, you could watch SpongeBob, or you could watch a silly little cartoon, you can watch Hello Kitty, or you can play video games that you used to like as a kid, or maybe you don't quite have the energy or the willpower to read a book, an adult's book, so instead you pick up a book of nursery rhymes and read those instead. I think it's quite refreshing sometimes to go back to real basics and just remind yourself of a time where you were happier. And sometimes reading those children's books or watching children's TV, it just kind of simplifies everything in your mind and it takes you back to simpler times. And simplicity is so comforting. Simplicity is a great kind of aid for depression, I think. My third point was to remind yourself that you have an illness. If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't get up every day and insist that you walk on that leg and that, oh, it'll get better if I just keep trying. You'd cater to it. You'd work your life around the fact you have a broken leg. You'd leave the house 20 minutes earlier knowing that it might take you a little longer to get wherever you're going. And maybe with depression, you notice that your lifestyle, you're working around a timetable that doesn't actually suit you, it doesn't suit your needs. Maybe you have no energy all morning, but then at 10 p.m. you find that you get a sudden surge of energy. And maybe you could be doing your housework at 10 p.m. instead of trying to do it at lunchtime or trying to do it in the morning. Try and reassess your timetable in a way which facilitates living for you, that makes life that little bit easier. And remind yourself also that you can't help being ill. You wouldn't beat yourself up, you wouldn't feel guilty about having a broken leg. But somehow with mental illness we beat ourselves up about it and we think, oh, I wish I could just get better. I don't know why I'm like this. I compare myself to other people. I don't know why I can't get out of bed, or I don't know why I can't just do all these things that my friends are doing. But it's an illness. Don't beat yourself up over something that you can't help. You didn't choose this lifestyle. And then my final point on this last question is that for me, as I say, depression is an illness, and it's a terrible illness to have. It's a real bummer. But I've noticed that there are things I do in my life that can improve my ability to deal with it, or there are things that make it worse. And a lot of my depressive tendencies are habit related. So when it gets to winter, for example, I'm very quick to decide that I'm not going to leave the house because I love being cozy, and when it rains I love hearing the rain on my roof, and I love having a bath when it's cold outside, and if it's snowing I love to stay inside or play video games and be all cozy and warm and in bed. And I think again I romanticize being indoors, and then a week goes by, and then 2 weeks go by, and then 3 weeks go by, and I've only left the house once or twice, and I find myself completely depressed. And I think, but I've been so cozy this whole time. But in reality what I've done is I haven't exercised and I haven't gotten myself any fresh air. Maybe I've been tucked up in bed and I haven't even gotten changed. I haven't gotten out of my pajamas. And what I've done with these cozy few weeks is I've gotten myself into a cycle of depression. I've gotten myself into a cycle and a lifestyle which resembles the lifestyle of a depressed person, or me when I was really struggling with depression. And I think my body knows it. My body's like, whoa, are we doing this again? And so to kind of counter that, I've been making sure that I leave the house every day, and it's not because I'm desperate to exercise, it's not because I'm desperate to go for a walk, it's not because I have places to be, it's because I know that I can slip very, very easily from being cozy and relaxed to being overwhelmed. I'm not in the habit of making my bed, so when I come into my bedroom it's a lot easier just to get back in bed because the bed was never made. I'm not in the habit of texting my friends. I'm not in the habit of leaving the house. And it means that eventually when I do come round to do these things, it's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming because it's not part of my daily routine. It's something extra. It's something extra I feel I have to do. When in reality, it could very easily be something that is part of my daily routine. So even today, even now, I consider myself out of my depression for now anyway. I try and keep these things in my routine because I've noticed these patterns. I try and treat it as like a science experiment, and maybe you notice things like if I drink water I feel better, if I smoke I feel worse, if I eat a lot of sugar I feel worse, if I eat vegetables it doesn't actually make a difference, but if I eat meat I feel better, or maybe if I eat meat it makes me feel worse, or maybe if I have my hair down it bothers me, or if I tie my hair up it makes me feel better. There are all these little things which accumulatively form your kind of state of mind, and they have a big impact on how you feel. But as I say, please just carry on seeking professional help. I hope these little tips are semi-useful. I don't know if they will be, but these are, again, my lived experiences, and to an extent I can only advise from my own life, right? Because this took so long to film, it's going to take twice as long to edit. I think my French version of the video will probably be coming out later this week, if not next week. I'll try and add French subtitles to this one, just in case people are desperate to hear my